The money sat there like it didn't belong to the world it was in. 10 crisp $100 bills lay neatly stacked on the edge of the wooden diner table, untouched, almost glowing under the flickering overhead light. The smell of fried onions and burnt coffee hung thick in the air, but Naomi Brooks couldn't smell anything anymore. Her heartbeat was too loud. No one was watching. The security monitor above the counter had been broken for weeks. The cook was asleep in the back room. The last customer had left 10 minutes ago. The neon open sign buzzed softly, half dead, like it might give up at any second. And right there, right in front of her, was $1,000. Naomi's fingers twitched. That money could change everything. She hadn't planned on working a double shift that night, but life didn't care about plans. Her babysitter canceled last minute. Her landlord had slid a final notice under her apartment door that morning. Her phone was already 3 weeks behind on payments, and the pharmacy had refused to release her son's medication without cash. And now this. She knew exactly how the money got there. She had served the man herself. The billionaire. He'd come in soaked from the rain, his expensive suit clinging awkwardly to his frame like it didn't belong on him. His hands shook when he ordered. Not from cold, Naomi knew better. She'd seen that kind of shaking before. Panic. Fear. The kind that crawls into your bones. She remembered how his phone rang while she was refilling his water. How he answered too fast. How his face drained of color. How long, he whispered. A pause. No, that's not possible. He didn't cry. He didn't raise his voice. But something inside him collapsed. When the food came, he barely touched it. When the check arrived, he didn't even look. He just pulled cash from his wallet, dropped it on the table, and walked out while still on the phone. He never looked back. This wasn't a tip. It was a mistake. Naomi swallowed hard. Keeping it would be easy. No cameras. No witnesses. No one would ever know. But she would. And she had 30 seconds to decide who she really was. Because somewhere out there, a man was racing toward the worst night of his life. And she was holding something he didn't even know he'd lost. If you think you know what you'd do in her place, stay with me, because Naomi's choice is about to change everything. Naomi Brooks had learned a long time ago not to trust quiet moments. Quiet usually meant something bad was about to happen. The diner was too still. The old wall clock above the counter ticked louder than it should have, each second scraping against her nerves. She wiped her hands on her apron even though they were already clean, her eyes drifting back to the table again. The money hadn't moved. It was still there. Still real. 10 bills. Perfectly aligned. Like they were waiting for her to make a decision. Naomi exhaled slowly and leaned against the counter, closing her eyes for just a second. Images rushed in uninvited. Her son, Eli, curled up on the couch with a heating pad pressed against his stomach, trying to be brave. The voicemail from the landlord, his voice flat and rehearsed. The pharmacy clerk shaking her head earlier that day. I'm sorry, ma'am. We can't release it without payment. $1,000 wouldn't fix her life. But it would keep it from falling apart. She opened her eyes and stared at the booth where the man had sat. The coffee cup was still there, untouched after the first sip. The plate of food looked barely disturbed, the steam long gone. Everything about the scene felt unfinished. Like the universe had hit pause and was waiting to see what she'd do next. Naomi walked over slowly and picked up the check presenter. The bill inside read $248.67. She swallowed. No one tipped $1,000 on a $200 meal. Not even rich people. Especially not someone who looked like their world had just ended. She replayed the moment again in her mind. The way his shoulders sagged when he stood up. The way his phone stayed glued to his ear. The way he said, "I'm coming now. I don't care how long it takes." That wasn't carelessness. That was desperation. Naomi glanced toward the front windows. The street outside was empty, rain pooling along the curb, headlights blurring past in the distance. Whoever he was already gone. Her fingers curled into her palm. If she kept the money, no one would ever know. But if she didn't, she had no idea what would happen next. "Girl, you seeing this?" Naomi flinched. Tasha, the other waitress on shift, stood near the soda machine, eyes locked on the table. She walked over slowly, like she was afraid the money might vanish if she moved too fast. "That his?" Tasha whispered. Naomi nodded. Tasha let out a low laugh. "Then that's your miracle." "It's not," Naomi said quietly. "He forgot it." "So?" Tasha shrugged. "You think billionaires double back for cash? He probably spends that on socks." Naomi shook her head. "He didn't mean to leave it." Tasha crossed her arms. "Naomi, you're always doing this. Always trying to be the good one. When does the universe get to be good back to you?" Naomi didn't answer. Because she didn't have one. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. The screen lit up with a notification she'd been avoiding all night. "Pharmacy, payment required." Her chest tightened. Tasha softened. "Look, I'm not saying you're a bad person if you keep it. I'm saying you're a mom. That comes first." Naomi stared at the message, then slowly locked her phone. She looked back at the money. And in that moment, she realized something that made her breath hitch. If she kept it, she'd never stop thinking about the man who lost it. About what that phone call meant. About what kind of night he was having right now. About whether he'd realize what he'd done too late. Naomi reached for the bills. Then stopped. She took one step back. "I have to give it back," she said. Tasha's eyes widened. "You're joking." "I'm not. You don't even know his name." Naomi closed her eyes, then opened them again with something like resolve. "I know where he's going." Tasha blinked. "What?" "He said it on the phone," Naomi said. "He said he was heading to St. Mark's. The hospital." The words hung between them. "You're going to chase a billionaire through a storm to return money he doesn't even know he lost?" Tasha asked. Naomi picked up the bills, her hands shaking now, and folded them carefully. "Yes. Naomi. If that was my kid in a hospital bed," Naomi said, her voice barely holding together, "I'd want someone to do the same for me." She slipped the money into her jacket pocket, untied her apron, and grabbed her keys. As she pushed the door open, rain rushed in like a warning. Tasha called after her. "You're crazy." Naomi paused, hand on the door. "Maybe," she said. "But I can live with that." She stepped into the storm. And with that single choice, Naomi Brooks walked away from the money that could have saved her. Without knowing she was walking straight toward the moment that would change her life forever. The rain hit Naomi the moment she stepped outside, sharp and relentless, soaking through her jacket in seconds. The diner door slammed shut behind her, the bell above it rattling once before falling silent again. The neon lights flickered, casting red and blue reflections across the wet pavement. Naomi stood there for a heartbeat, breathing hard, her hand pressed against her jacket pocket where the money rested like a living thing. She had never done anything like this before. She was the kind of person who followed rules, who stayed in her lane, who survived by not drawing attention to herself. Chasing down a stranger, much less a billionaire, wasn't part of her nature. But neither was taking what didn't belong to her. She scanned the street. Headlights streaked past in the distance. A bus roared by, spraying water onto the sidewalk. Somewhere down the block, a car door slammed. Naomi's pulse spiked. Think. The man had left less than 5 minutes ago. He'd been in a hurry. People in that kind of rush didn't wander, they went straight where they needed to be. She remembered the sound of his voice on the phone. Urgent. Controlled. Cracking at the edges. I'm coming now. Naomi turned toward the parking lot. Most of the spaces were empty. A few old sedans sat abandoned looking under the rain. Then she saw it. A black luxury SUV idled near the far exit, its brake lights glowing red through the downpour. Her heart leapt. That's him, she whispered. She broke into a run. Her shoes slipped on the slick pavement, nearly sending her down. Pain shot up her ankle, but she didn't slow. She waved one arm wildly as she ran, rain plastering her hair to her face. Hey, she shouted. Sir, wait. The SUV began to roll forward. Panic surged. Naomi ran harder, lungs burning, jacket flapping open. She slapped her hand against the side of the vehicle just as it reached the exit. The SUV screeched to a stop. The driver's side window rolled down halfway. What the hell, the man snapped, then stopped short. It was him. Up close, he looked worse than she remembered. His face was drawn tight, eyes rimmed red, jaw clenched like he was holding himself together through sheer force of will. He stared at her like she'd materialized out of the storm. You, he said slowly. Naomi bent forward, hands on her knees, gasping for air. Rain streamed off her nose and chin. You left this, she said, pulling the folded bills from her pocket and holding them up. For a moment, he didn't react. Then his eyes dropped to the money. Confusion flickered across his face. Then realization. Then something darker, shock, maybe, or disbelief. He broke off, running a hand through his hair. I didn't realize. You left it on the table, Naomi said, straightening. I thought you might need it. The words sounded ridiculous the moment she said them. Need it. As if a man like this ever needed money. But his expression changed. He looked away, swallowing hard. I don't have time, he said hoarsely. I'm on my way to the hospital. I know, Naomi said softly. That got his attention. He looked back at her, eyes narrowing slightly. How? You said it on the phone, she explained quickly. St. Mark's. His shoulders sagged just a fraction. Of course she'd heard. Of course. He took the money slowly, his fingers brushing hers as he did. They were cold. Shaking. Thank you, he said after a moment. His voice was quieter now. Raw. Most people wouldn't have done this. Naomi shrugged, suddenly feeling exposed. I just couldn't keep it. He studied her then, really looked at her, rain-soaked uniform and all. What's your name? He asked. Naomi. Naomi, he repeated, like he was committing it to memory. I'm Daniel Ross. The name landed heavy. Even Naomi, who barely followed the news, knew it. Daniel Ross. Venture capitalist. Tech mogul. One of the youngest self-made billionaires in the state. She felt suddenly very small. I have to go, Daniel said, gripping the steering wheel. But, thank you. Really? Naomi nodded. I hope everything's okay. He didn't answer. He just nodded once, sharply, like if he spoke again he might break. The window rolled up. The SUV pulled away. Naomi stood there as the taillights disappeared into the rain, her chest tight with something she couldn't name. She watched until the street was empty again. Then she turned around and walked back to her car. The drive to the hospital felt longer than it was. Naomi hadn't planned on following him. She told herself she was just heading home. But her hands turned the wheel without conscious thought, guiding her toward St. Mark's like something inside her already knew she wasn't finished. Rain battered the windshield. Wipers squealed back and forth. Streetlights blurred into streaks of yellow and white. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder. She ignored it. She already knew what it was. When she pulled into the hospital parking lot, the SUV was there. She sat in her car for a long moment, engine idling, heart racing. What are you doing? She thought. She had returned the money. Her part was done. But her feet moved anyway. Inside, the hospital smelled like antiseptic and exhaustion. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in harsh clarity. Naomi approached the front desk, wiping rain from her face. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "I'm looking for Daniel Ross." The receptionist's expression changed immediately. Professional. Guarded. "Are you family?" "No," Naomi said. "I was at the diner earlier. He left something behind. I just returned it. I just wanted to make sure he was okay." The receptionist hesitated, then picked up the phone. "Wait here." Naomi sank into a plastic chair, clutching her jacket around herself. Around her, life unfolded in fragments. A woman cried softly into her phone. A man paced the hallway, hands clenched. A nurse hurried past, eyes tired but focused. Minutes passed. Then footsteps approached. Naomi looked up. Daniel stood there. His jacket was gone. His shirt was wrinkled. His composure, barely intact. "You followed me," he said. Naomi stood quickly. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to intrude. I just—" "My son," Daniel said abruptly. Her breath caught. "He's 8, he continued, voice hollow. "Collapsed at school today. They don't know why yet." Naomi felt tears sting her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Daniel looked at her, something like disbelief crossing his face. "You didn't have to come," he said. "I know," Naomi replied. "But I couldn't stop thinking about you." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel gestured down the hall. "Come sit," he said. "Please." And without realizing it, Naomi stepped fully into the night that would change everything. The hallway outside the pediatric ICU felt unnaturally quiet. Every sound echoed too loudly, the squeak of shoes on polished floors, the distant beep of monitors, the soft murmur of voices behind closed doors. Naomi walked beside Daniel without speaking, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. She felt like she had crossed into sacred ground, a place where words mattered less than presence. Daniel stopped near a row of plastic chairs and lowered himself into one like his body had finally given up. "She's inside," he said, nodding toward a door with frosted glass. "My ex-wife. They won't let both of us in at the same time." Naomi sat across from him. For a long moment, Daniel just stared at the floor, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together so tightly his knuckles had gone white. "I was on a conference call when the school called," he said finally. "I almost ignored it." Naomi's chest tightened. "They said he fainted. Then they said he stopped breathing for a moment. By the time I got there, the ambulance was already gone." His voice cracked, just slightly. "I keep thinking, if I'd answered sooner, if I'd been there." Naomi leaned forward instinctively. "You didn't cause this." Daniel let out a short, humorless laugh. "I build companies worth billions of dollars. I solve problems for a living. And yet the one thing I can't fix is my own kid lying unconscious behind that door." Naomi didn't interrupt. She had learned something as a mother: sometimes the most important thing you could do was listen without trying to make the pain disappear. "My assistant keeps calling," Daniel continued. "Investors, Board members. They're worried about stock movement. About optics. He shook his head slowly. I don't care if the whole empire collapses tonight. Naomi nodded. That makes sense. He looked up at her then, surprised. It does? Yes, she said softly. Because right now, none of that matters. Daniel studied her face like he was seeing something rare. You didn't have to come back, he said again. You already did more than enough. Naomi hesitated, then said the truth. I almost kept it. Daniel stiffened slightly. The money, she clarified. I needed it. Badly. He waited. My son's sick, Naomi continued. Chronic condition. Medication isn't cheap. And today was one of those days where everything felt like it was closing in. Daniel exhaled slowly. And yet you still came. Naomi nodded. Because when I saw your face, I recognized it. Daniel frowned. From where? From the mirror, she said. From nights when I thought I was going to lose him. From moments when the world feels like it's punishing you for caring too much. Daniel's eyes shone. I don't even know why I'm telling you this, he admitted. I don't talk to strangers. Naomi offered a small, sad smile. I don't usually chase billionaires through parking lots. That earned the faintest hint of a smile from him. A nurse appeared at the door then. Mr. Ross? Daniel stood instantly. We're stabilizing him, the nurse said. He's still unconscious, but his vitals are improving. You can see him in a few minutes. Daniel sagged with relief, one hand coming up to his face. Thank you, he whispered. The nurse nodded and disappeared again. Daniel turned to Naomi. You don't have to stay. Naomi shook her head. I want to. They sat together in silence, broken only by the hum of machines behind the walls. Minutes later, Daniel returned from the room alone. He squeezed my hand, he said quietly. They say it might have been reflex, but I don't care. It felt like him. Naomi smiled through tears. I should get home, she said gently. My son's waiting for me too. Daniel stood with her. Can I? He stopped himself. Can I get your number? Naomi blinked. Why? In case, he said simply. I'd like to thank you properly. When things aren't, like this. She hesitated for only a moment before pulling out her phone. They exchanged numbers. Naomi, Daniel said as she turned to leave. Tonight, you reminded me that decency still exists. I won't forget that. She nodded, unsure what to say. She left the hospital feeling lighter and heavier all at once. The next morning, Naomi woke to the sound of her phone buzzing. She reached for it groggily, heart racing before she even checked the screen. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. Hello? Naomi, Daniel's voice said. It's Daniel. She sat up instantly. Is he okay? He woke up, Daniel said, breathless with relief. Asking for pancakes, of all things. Naomi laughed, tears spilling freely. That's amazing. It is, he agreed. Listen, can I see you today? She hesitated. I have work. I'll come to you, he said. Please. Just 10 minutes. An hour later, Daniel Ross walked into the diner like a man stepping into another world. Heads turned. Whispers spread. Naomi froze behind the counter, coffee pot in hand. He smiled when he saw her. And for the first time since their paths crossed, he looked like a man who could breathe again. The diner felt different the moment Daniel walked in. It wasn't just the tailored coat or the quiet confidence that followed him like a shadow. It was the way the air shifted, like everyone subconsciously knew something important had entered the room. Naomi noticed it immediately. She was wiping down the counter when the bell above the door rang. She didn't look up at first. She was used to businessmen, truck drivers, tired parents, and night shift workers drifting in and out without meaning much to her day. Then she felt it. That strange stillness. She glanced up. Daniel stood just inside the doorway, rain-speckled sunlight behind him, hands tucked into his coat pockets like he wasn't quite sure where to put them. He scanned the room once before his eyes landed on her. And when they did, his face softened. Naomi's heart skipped. For a split second, she forgot where she was. Then reality snapped back. Table or counter? Carla called from the grill, not recognizing him. Daniel smiled politely. Counter, please. He took the stool directly across from Naomi. Up close, he looked different in daylight. Less guarded. More human. The dark circles under his eyes hadn't disappeared, but they no longer screamed panic, just exhaustion. How's your son? Naomi asked quietly as she poured coffee. Daniel's mouth curved into a real smile this time. Arguing with nurses. Asking for syrup. Threatening to escape. Naomi laughed softly. That's a good sign. It's the best sign, he said. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The clink of dishes, the sizzle of the grill, the low hum of conversation filled the space between them. I didn't mean to cause a scene, Daniel said finally, glancing around. I know I stand out. Naomi shrugged. You came to a diner. That's on you. That earned a quiet chuckle. I've never been here during the day, he admitted. It's warm. Naomi paused. That's the grease. Daniel laughed again, surprising her. She slid a plate toward him. Pancakes. Extra syrup. You didn't order, he said. You did, Naomi replied. Yesterday. He stared at the plate like it meant more than food. Thank you, he said. As he ate, Naomi noticed something she hadn't expected. He wasn't checking his phone. It sat face down on the counter, ignored. Won't the world fall apart? She teased gently. Daniel swallowed, then shrugged. If it does, I'll rebuild it later. Carla leaned over. Friend of yours, she whispered. Naomi hesitated. Something like that. Daniel looked up. I'm Daniel. Carla's eyes widened. Just a flicker, but Naomi caught it. Oh, Carla said. Well, enjoy the pancakes. As Carla retreated, Daniel leaned closer. You didn't tell her. Naomi shook her head. You didn't ask. I like that, he said. After a moment, he grew serious. I wanted to ask you something, Daniel said. And you're allowed to say no. Naomi folded her arms. That sounds dangerous. He met her eyes. Let me help you. Her chest tightened. I don't want charity. I know, he said quickly. That's not what I mean. He took a breath. You mentioned your son. The medication. The cost. Naomi's defenses went up instantly. Daniel. Just listen, he said gently. I have resources. Doctors. Specialists. I can make calls that don't get ignored. Silence stretched between them. Naomi looked away. People don't help for free. Daniel didn't argue. You helped me for nothing. She swallowed. That was different. Why? He asked. Because he had looked broken. Because she had seen herself in him. Because doing the right thing felt easier than living with regret. She didn't say any of that. I'll think about it, she said instead. Daniel nodded. That's enough. He paid for the meal, left a tip that made Naomi's stomach flip, and stood to leave. Before he reached the door, he turned back. Naomi? Yes? You don't belong behind this counter forever. The words followed her long after he left. That evening, Naomi sat beside her son's bed, watching his chest rise and fall. She brushed his hair back gently. "Mama," he murmured. "You look tired." She smiled. "I'm okay." Her phone buzzed softly. A message from Daniel. "Daniel, I meant what I said. No pressure. Just, don't disappear." Naomi typed, erased, typed again. "Naomi, I won't." She stared at the screen for a long time. Somewhere deep down, she felt it. This wasn't just a chance meeting. It was the beginning of something she couldn't yet name. The days that followed settled into a strange rhythm. On the surface, Naomi's life looked exactly the same. She still woke before sunrise, still packed lunches, still tied her apron strings at the diner with practiced hands. Bills still waited on the kitchen table. Her car still made that rattling sound when she turned the key. But underneath it all, something had shifted. Daniel texted her once a day. Never long messages. Never intrusive. Just enough to remind her he was there. "How's your son today? Hope your shift wasn't too rough. He finally slept through the night." Small miracles. Naomi found herself looking forward to those messages more than she wanted to admit. She didn't answer immediately. She never did. Part of her was still guarding something fragile, unsure where this road might lead. Still, she replied. And every reply felt like stepping 1 inch closer to a line she wasn't sure she should cross. On Thursday evening, Daniel came back to the diner. This time, Naomi noticed it before he even walked in. The bell rang. She looked up instinctively. There he was again, coat slung over his arm, eyes scanning the room until they found her. He smiled, not the relieved smile from before, not the polite one he wore in public, but something quieter. Something familiar. "You're becoming a regular," Naomi said as she poured his coffee. "I like places where people don't pretend," Daniel replied. She raised an eyebrow. "You're saying we don't pretend?" "I'm saying," he said, lowering his voice slightly, "that no one here looks at me like I'm something they want from." Naomi paused. "I look at you like someone who left money on a table," she said dryly. Daniel laughed. "Fair." He grew thoughtful as he stirred his coffee. "I spoke to a pediatric specialist today," he said carefully. "Didn't give them names. Just asked questions." Naomi stiffened. "Daniel. Just information," he said quickly. "Nothing more." She studied his face, searching for pressure, expectation, obligation. She found none. "Thank you," she said finally. "For asking." They sat in companionable silence for a while. Then Daniel surprised her. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said. Naomi hesitated. "You already know a lot." "I want to know you," he replied. She exhaled slowly. "Okay. Why are you here?" he asked gently. "Not the diner. I mean, why you keep going?" The question caught her off guard. Naomi leaned against the counter, eyes drifting toward the window. "My husband left when our son was 3, she said quietly. Said he couldn't handle hospitals. Or uncertainty." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I don't hate him," Naomi continued. "I just learned I couldn't rely on anyone else." Daniel nodded. "That changes a person." "Yes," she said. "It does." He met her eyes. "You shouldn't have had to do it alone." The words settled heavy between them. Before Naomi could respond, Carla called from the kitchen. "Naomi. Table 6 needs refills." Naomi straightened. "Duty calls." Daniel stood. I'll walk you out after your shift. Naomi blinked. You don't have to. I want to, he said simply. The night air was cool when they stepped outside together. Streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement. The diner buzzed behind them, warm and alive, while the world beyond felt quieter. They walked side by side without touching. Yet. I'm not good at this, Daniel admitted after a moment. At what? Naomi asked. Letting people in, he said. Especially when I don't control the outcome. Naomi nodded. Neither am I. They stopped near her car. Daniel hesitated, then spoke. I'm not asking for anything, he said carefully. I just want to be present. For you. However that looks. Naomi felt something tighten in her chest. I don't want my life turned upside down, she said honestly. Daniel smiled faintly. Neither do I. They stood there longer than necessary. Then Naomi opened her car door. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Naomi. As she drove away, she realized something scared her more than change. How natural this already felt. That weekend, Naomi finally said yes. Not to money. Not to favors. Just to coffee. They met at a small cafe across town, neutral ground. Daniel arrived early. Naomi noticed that too. They talked for hours. About childhoods. About mistakes. About fear. Not once did money come up. And when Naomi laughed, really laughed, Daniel realized something important. For the first time in years, he wasn't trying to escape his life. He was stepping into someone else's. The cafe sat on a quiet corner street, far from glass towers and traffic noise. It wasn't the kind of place Daniel would normally visit. The chairs didn't match. The tables wobbled slightly. A chalkboard menu hung crooked behind the counter, written in looping handwriting. Naomi liked it immediately. Daniel noticed that before she even said a word. She relaxed the moment she stepped inside, shoulders dropping just a little, as if she'd entered a space that didn't demand anything from her. She ordered tea instead of coffee, added honey, and chose a table near the window where sunlight pooled gently across the wood. Daniel followed her lead. They talked slowly at first, circling around safe topics. Naomi spoke about the diner, the regulars, the early mornings, the way time felt different when you measured it in refills and receipts. Daniel listened carefully, asking questions that showed he was actually paying attention, not just waiting for his turn to speak. In return, he told her about his childhood. Not the polished version that appeared in interviews. The real one. My mother worked 3 jobs, he said. I learned early that stability wasn't guaranteed. So I chased control instead. Naomi nodded. Control feels safer than hope. Daniel looked at her, surprised. Exactly. The hours slipped by unnoticed. At some point, Naomi realized she hadn't checked the time once. That alone felt strange. Her life was usually divided into minutes and obligations. This felt suspended. Eventually, Daniel glanced at his phone and frowned. I should go, he said reluctantly. I promised my son I'd be back before dinner. Naomi smiled. That's good. He hesitated. Can I see you again? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she asked, why? Daniel considered the question carefully. Because you don't disappear when things get hard, he said. And because when I'm around you, I remember who I was before everything became about winning. Naomi absorbed that quietly. Okay, she said. We can do this again. Daniel exhaled like he'd been holding his breath. The next few weeks unfolded gently. No grand gestures. No sudden changes. Just consistency. Daniel showed up when he said he would. Naomi noticed that. He remembered small details, her son's favorite cereal, the way she took her tea, which days were hardest at the diner. He never pushed. When Naomi had to cancel because her son wasn't feeling well, Daniel simply replied. Tell him I hope tomorrow is easier. No guilt. No pressure. Slowly, trust took root. One evening, Naomi invited Daniel to her apartment. It wasn't fancy. Second-hand furniture. Cracked tiles. A faint hum from the old refrigerator. Daniel didn't comment on any of it. He took off his shoes at the door without being asked. Her son, Marcus, watched him closely from the couch. So you're the pancake man, Marcus said finally. Daniel smiled. I've been called worse. Marcus nodded, satisfied. They played a board game on the floor. Daniel lost badly. On purpose? Naomi wasn't sure, but she noticed the way he laughed when Marcus won, like losing didn't matter at all. Later, when Marcus fell asleep, Naomi walked Daniel to the door. Thank you, she said. For being normal. Daniel smiled softly. I don't feel normal. You are, Naomi replied. Here. They stood there, the moment stretching thin. Something hovered between them, unspoken, careful. Daniel stepped back first. Good night, Naomi. Good night. She closed the door and leaned against it, heart racing. At the same time, Daniel's world began to notice his absence. Meetings postponed. Calls unanswered. Decisions delegated. His assistant finally confronted him. You've changed, she said carefully. Is everything okay? Daniel thought of Naomi's kitchen. Of Marcus's laughter. Of silence that didn't feel empty. Yes, he said. For once, it is. Change didn't arrive loudly. It arrived quietly. In small decisions. In time spent. In priorities shifting inch by inch. And neither of them realized yet that the hardest part wasn't beginning something new. It was what the world would demand once it noticed. The first crack appeared quietly. It wasn't a headline or a confrontation. It was a missed call. Naomi noticed it while wiping down the counter during a slow afternoon shift. Daniel's name lit up her phone, then vanished before she could answer. No voicemail followed. That in itself wasn't strange. What was strange was the second missed call an hour later. And the third that evening. By the time she got home, unease had settled into her chest. She sent a short text. Naomi, everything okay? The reply didn't come until much later. Daniel, I'm sorry. Today got away from me. Can we talk tomorrow? She stared at the message for a long moment. Naomi, sure. She put the phone down, but sleep didn't come easily that night. The next day, Daniel arrived at the cafe looking different. Not tired. Guarded. He ordered coffee but barely touched it. His phone sat on the table this time, lighting up every few minutes. Naomi noticed everything. Bad day? She asked gently. Daniel exhaled slowly. My world remembered I exist. She waited. They want me back, he continued. Full force. Deals, appearances, interviews. They don't like uncertainty. Naomi nodded. And right now, you're uncertain. Yes, he said. About everything. He leaned forward. I don't want to lose this. Naomi's fingers tightened around her cup. But you're afraid you will, she said. Daniel didn't deny it. My life doesn't slow down easily, he admitted. People get hurt when it doesn't. The words landed heavy. Are you saying I'm in the way? Naomi asked quietly. No, Daniel said quickly. I'm saying I don't know how to protect you from it. Silence stretched between them. Naomi looked out the window, watching people pass by, ordinary lives, ordinary problems. "This is my life," she said finally. "It's messy, and small, and fragile. I can't afford chaos." Daniel nodded. "Neither can I." They sat there, two people standing at the edge of something real. "I don't need saving," Naomi said. "And I won't be hidden." Daniel met her gaze. "I would never ask you to be." But doubt had already crept in. That weekend, the story broke. Daniel Ross had been spotted repeatedly at a local diner. Photos circulated. Speculation followed. Secret girlfriend? Image makeover? Distraction from recent market instability? Naomi saw it on a customer's phone before Daniel could warn her. Her stomach dropped. When Daniel arrived at her apartment that evening, he looked like a man bracing for impact. "I'm so sorry," he said immediately. "I didn't think they'd notice so soon." Naomi crossed her arms. "This is what you meant." "Yes," he said quietly. "This is the cost." Marcus peeked around the corner, sensing tension. Naomi softened instantly. "Go finish your homework, sweetheart." When they were alone, she faced Daniel fully. "I won't let my son become collateral," she said firmly. Daniel nodded. "I understand." "Do you?" she asked. "Because this doesn't stop. It escalates." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "I can make it go away." Naomi's eyes narrowed. "How?" "By stepping back," he said. "By letting them get bored." The word sounded reasonable. But they felt wrong. "And us?" Naomi asked. Daniel hesitated. That was answer enough. "I think you should go," Naomi said softly. Daniel's face tightened. "Naomi. Not because I don't care," she continued. "But because I care too much to pretend this won't hurt." He stood there for a long moment, torn. Then he nodded. "I won't disappear," he said. "I promise." Naomi didn't answer. She watched him leave. That night, Daniel sat alone in his penthouse, lights off, city stretching endlessly below. For the first time, success felt hollow. And for the first time, he understood something terrifying. Walking away from power was easy. Walking away from her was not. The silence that followed Daniel's departure settled slowly. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't crash through Naomi's life all at once. Instead, it crept in quietly, filling the spaces where his presence had been, empty chairs, unread messages, routines that no longer made sense. Naomi went back to work the next morning like nothing had changed. She tied her apron. She poured coffee. She smiled when required. But everything felt heavier. Carla noticed first. "You okay?" she asked during a lull, leaning against the counter. Naomi nodded automatically. "Just tired." Carla studied her a moment longer, then let it go. At home, Marcus sensed it too. He asked fewer questions. Stayed closer. Watched Naomi's face more than his cartoons. That alone made her ache. Daniel kept his promise. He didn't disappear. He just stayed at a distance. Messages came every few days instead of every day. Shorter. Careful. "Hope Marcus is feeling okay. Thinking of you." No pressure to reply. Naomi read them all. She answered none. Not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't know how. 2 weeks passed. The media cycle moved on, as it always did. Daniel's name returned to stock updates and conference panels. Naomi faded back into anonymity. That was supposed to make things easier. It didn't. One evening, Naomi found herself standing outside the cafe where they'd first talked for hours. She hadn't planned to go there. Her feet had carried her without asking permission. She stood there for a long time, watching people come and go. Then she turned away. Some things, she realized, weren't meant to be revisited halfway. Daniel, meanwhile, struggled in ways he hadn't anticipated. He sat in meetings and heard nothing. Signed documents without reading them. Nodded at people whose names he suddenly couldn't remember. His assistant watched with growing concern. "You're not present," she said finally. Daniel looked up. "I don't want to be." She hesitated. "Is this about her?" Daniel didn't answer. That was answer enough. The call came on a Thursday night. Naomi almost didn't answer. Unknown number. Her chest tightened as she picked up. "Hello?" "Naomi," Daniel said. She closed her eyes. Marcus collapsed, he continued quickly. "At home. I'm at the hospital. They said you're on your way, but..." Naomi was already grabbing her keys. "I'm coming," she said, voice steady despite the fear flooding her veins. She hung up and drove faster than she ever had, heart pounding with every mile. At the hospital, she found Daniel pacing the hallway, face pale. "He's stable," Daniel said the moment he saw her. "But they're running tests." Naomi leaned against the wall, dizzy with relief and fear. Daniel stood close, not touching her, but there. After a moment, Naomi spoke. "You didn't have to call." Daniel shook his head. "Yes, I did." She looked at him then, really looked. And in that moment, all the distance, all the fear, all the careful steps fell away. This wasn't about money. Or power. Or attention. It was about showing up. Later, when Marcus slept peacefully, Naomi and Daniel sat side by side again. Just like before. "I'm scared," Naomi admitted quietly. Daniel nodded. "So am I." She turned to him. "I can't do this halfway." He met her gaze. "Neither can I." They sat there, knowing the next choice would change everything. And this time, neither of them looked away. The hospital room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of machines and the hallway light slipping in through the cracked door. Marcus slept curled on his side, one small hand wrapped loosely around a stuffed dinosaur a nurse had brought him. The steady rhythm of the monitor was the only sound grounding the moment. Naomi watched her son breathe, counting each rise and fall like a prayer she didn't dare interrupt. Daniel stood a few steps behind her, hands clasped, posture stiff, not from discomfort, but from restraint. He didn't want to intrude. Didn't want to assume. Finally, Naomi spoke. "They think it's related to his condition," she said quietly. "A complication they warned me about, but said was unlikely." Daniel nodded slowly. "Unlikely never feels unlikely when it's your child." She turned to him. "You didn't have to come so fast." "I didn't come fast," Daniel said softly. "I was already afraid." That made her pause. They stepped out into the hallway, closing the door gently behind them. Naomi leaned against the wall, exhaustion catching up all at once. Daniel noticed immediately. "Sit," he said, guiding her toward a chair. She didn't argue. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The hospital had a way of stripping people down to the essentials. There was no room for ego here. No masks. No performances. "I can't keep pretending this isn't my reality," Naomi said eventually. "That I can control everything if I just try harder." Daniel listened. "I've lived my whole life believing control was the answer," he replied. "That if I moved fast enough, built enough, won enough, nothing bad could touch me." He shook his head. "I was wrong." Naomi looked at him. "Then why are you still trying to step away from this?" Daniel met her eyes. Because I don't know how to stand beside you without casting a shadow. The honesty in his voice stunned her. I don't need you to fix my life, Naomi said. I need you to be honest about wanting to be in it. The days after the hospital became a turning point neither of them could ignore. Daniel didn't return to the penthouse that night. Instead, he stayed close, to the hospital, to Naomi, to the fragile bubble they were suddenly living inside. He slept in a chair more than once, jacket folded under his head, phone silenced for the first time in years. Naomi noticed everything. How he never complained. How he listened more than he spoke. How he learned the nurses' names. This wasn't a performance. This was presence. Marcus improved slowly. Not dramatically. Not overnight. But steadily. Each small victory felt monumental. Sitting up longer. Eating without nausea. Smiling more easily. Laughing when Daniel made a ridiculous attempt at magic with a coin. Naomi watched those moments with a quiet ache in her chest, not pain, but something close to gratitude. One afternoon, while Marcus napped, Naomi and Daniel stepped out onto the hospital balcony. The city stretched below them, indifferent and endless. I've been offered a deal, Daniel said quietly. A big one. International expansion. Naomi waited. I turned it down, he continued. At least for now. She looked at him, surprised. You didn't tell me. I didn't want it to feel like a sacrifice, Daniel said. This isn't about choosing between lives. It's about choosing how to live one. Naomi absorbed that. I'm scared, she admitted. Of what happens when this becomes normal. When the cameras come back. When people start having opinions. Daniel nodded. They will. And my son, she added. He didn't ask for any of this. Neither did mine, Daniel said gently. Which is why I'll protect that part fiercely. They stood in silence, the wind cool against their faces. The announcement came a week later. Short. Controlled. Honest. Daniel Ross would be stepping back from day-to-day leadership temporarily to focus on family matters. No names. No details. No spectacle. The world speculated. But Daniel didn't correct them. Naomi returned to the diner part-time. Not because she had to. Because she wanted to. Life, she believed, shouldn't be erased just because circumstances changed. Some customers recognized her. Most didn't. Carla hugged her hard the first day back. You good? She asked. Naomi smiled. Getting there. Daniel came by once a week. Always low-key. Always respectful of the space. Never demanding more than Naomi was ready to give. One evening, months later, they sat on a park bench while Marcus and Daniel's son kicked a soccer ball nearby. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in soft golds and blues. This looks simple, Naomi said quietly. It is, Daniel replied. And it isn't. She nodded. I used to think love had to be dramatic to be real. Daniel smiled faintly. I used to think stability was boring. They watched the boys laugh. I don't know what the future looks like, Naomi said. Daniel took a slow breath. Neither do I. He turned to her. But I know I don't want to face it without honesty. Or without you. Naomi didn't answer right away. She looked at the children. At the quiet. At the life that had grown, not suddenly, but carefully. Then we take it one day at a time, she said. Daniel nodded. That sounds right. And for the first time, the uncertainty didn't feel like a threat. It felt like possibility. Time did what it always does, it moved forward, whether people were ready or not. Seasons changed quietly around them. Marcus grew stronger. His color returned. Hospital visits became shorter, then less frequent, until one day the doctor smiled and said, "See you in 3 months instead of 3 weeks." Naomi cried in the car afterward. Not loudly. Just enough to let the fear finally drain out. Daniel sat beside her, hand resting gently on the console, not holding, just there. Present without pressure. Life settled into something resembling normal. Daniel downsized his schedule permanently. Fewer flights. Fewer late nights. More mornings making breakfast badly and pretending not to notice when the boys laughed at him. Naomi picked up extra shifts when she wanted, not because she had to. She started taking online classes at night, something she'd put off for years. Just in case, she told Daniel. In case of what? He asked. In case I forget I'm more than my circumstances. Daniel smiled. You never were. The attention faded, slowly but surely. People found new stories. New scandals. New distractions. Occasionally, someone recognized Daniel at the grocery store or the park. He handled it calmly, never defensive, never performative. Naomi watched how he shielded the children from it without making them feel hidden. That mattered. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the windows, Naomi found Daniel standing in her small kitchen, staring at a chipped photo frame on the counter. It held a picture of her and Marcus years ago, both thinner, both tired, both smiling anyway. You kept everything, Daniel said quietly. Naomi nodded. I didn't know what was temporary. Daniel turned to her. And now? She thought for a moment. Now I know what's worth keeping. He didn't speak. He just reached for her hand. Not dramatically. Not urgently. Just enough. Months later, Daniel stood in front of a room full of people again. Not investors. Parents. He spoke about balance. About stepping back. About redefining success in ways no spreadsheet could measure. Naomi watched from the back of the room, arms folded loosely, pride swelling in her chest. This wasn't the man she'd met in the diner. This was someone shaped by loss, fear, and choice. Someone who had learned to stay. That night, after the children were asleep, Daniel and Naomi sat on the balcony, city lights flickering below. I used to think love was something you earned, Daniel said. Or proved. Naomi shook her head. It's something you show up for. He looked at her, really looked. Thank you, he said. For chasing me down in the rain. Naomi smiled softly. Thank you for stopping. They sat there, wrapped in quiet, knowing their story wasn't perfect. But it was honest. And that was enough. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Naomi almost threw it away. It was thick, cream-colored, with a return address printed in clean, elegant lettering. The kind of envelope that usually meant bills, lawyers, or bad news disguised as politeness. She set it on the counter and walked past it 3 times before finally opening it. Inside was an invitation. Not flashy. Not dramatic. Just honest. Daniel was being asked to speak at a national conference on ethical leadership and corporate accountability. They wanted him to talk about the moment that changed everything. The moment he stopped measuring life in numbers and started measuring it in people. At the bottom of the page was a handwritten note. I won't go unless you're willing to stand beside me. Daniel. Naomi folded the letter slowly. She wasn't afraid of stages anymore. But she was afraid of being seen again. The conference was held in Chicago. A city of steel and glass, loud and fast, with no patience for hesitation. Naomi stood backstage with Daniel, listening to the muffled sound of applause from the previous speaker. Her hands were steady, but her chest wasn't. You don't have to do this, Daniel said quietly. I meant it when I wrote that. Naomi looked at him. Really looked. The man who once rushed out of a diner without noticing the world around him now waited for her answer like it mattered more than the room full of people beyond the curtain. "I want to," she said. "I just don't want to disappear afterward." Daniel nodded. "You won't." When they stepped onto the stage together, the room fell silent. Daniel spoke first. He didn't start with success. He didn't start with money. He started with a mistake. He told them about a night, a diner, a distracted mind, and a waitress who made a choice no algorithm could predict. Then he stopped. And he turned to Naomi. "This is Naomi Carter," he said. "And this is where the story actually begins." The room leaned in. Naomi felt the familiar tightening in her chest, but she breathed through it. "I didn't chase him for praise," she said. "I chased him because I knew what it felt like to be breaking inside while the world kept moving." She paused. Integrity isn't loud. It's quiet. It looks like doing the right thing when nobody's clapping. The silence afterward was heavier than applause. Then the room stood. All of them. Life changed again after that. But this time, Naomi was ready. She was invited to speak. To mentor. To sit on panels she never imagined herself part of. She said no more than yes. Because now, she knew her limits mattered. Daniel watched her grow into it, not ahead of her, not behind her. Beside her. One evening, months later, Naomi found Marcus in the living room, surrounded by notebooks. "What's all this?" she asked. He grinned. "I'm writing about you." Naomi laughed. "Please don't." "I'm serious," he said. "About how one decision can change everything." Naomi sat beside him. "Make sure you write the boring parts too." "The boring parts?" "The nights you're tired. The days you doubt yourself. The moments when doing the right thing doesn't feel heroic at all." Marcus nodded slowly. "Those are the hardest parts to write. They're the most important." Years later, people would still talk about the diner story. But Naomi remembered something else more clearly. The quiet mornings. The steady breathing of her children at night. The feeling of choosing who she wanted to be, over and over again. Not once. Every day. Because the truth was simple. She didn't return the money and get rewarded. She returned the money and became someone she could live with. And everything else followed. Time softened things. Not erased them, but softened the sharp edges. Naomi learned that healing didn't arrive all at once. It came in fragments. In ordinary moments that didn't announce themselves as important until much later. Like the first time she realized she hadn't checked her bank balance in days. Or the night she slept a full 8 hours without waking in a panic. Or the afternoon Marcus came home from school and casually said, "Mom, I think I want to study ethics or law or something like that." She looked at him, startled. "That's very specific." He shrugged. "I just keep thinking about how one decision can affect a lot of people. Even when it seems small." Naomi smiled, heart heavy in the best way. Daniel kept his promise. He never tried to turn her into a symbol. When people asked for interviews focused only on the waitress who changed a billionaire's life, he declined them. "That story isn't complete without the rest of her life," he'd say. "And that part isn't for public consumption." Naomi appreciated that more than she ever said out loud. They moved slowly. No rushed labels. No dramatic declarations. Just consistency. Daniel showed up to school meetings. Naomi showed up to investor dinners when she chose to. They learned each other's rhythms, the silences, the moods, the moments when one needed space instead of reassurance. Trust wasn't built in grand gestures. It was built in repetition. One afternoon, years after the diner, Naomi stood outside that same building. The sign had changed. New paint. New owners. But the shape of the place was the same. Daniel stood beside her. You don't have to go in. I want to, she said. Inside, it smelled different. Cleaner. Less worn. A young waitress passed by, balancing plates, stress written all over her face. Naomi recognized herself instantly. She left a generous tip. Not because she had to. Because she remembered. That night, back home, Daniel asked her something he'd been holding in for a while. Do you ever wish you'd kept the money? Naomi didn't answer immediately. She thought of who she had been that night. The fear. The hunger. The exhaustion. Then she thought of who she was now. No, she said finally. Because if I had, I'd always wonder who I could have been instead. Daniel nodded. That question haunts more people than debt ever does. Years later, Naomi started a foundation. Not a flashy one. A quiet one. Emergency grants for people who did the right thing and paid for it anyway. Waitresses. Janitors. Nurses. Delivery drivers. People whose integrity didn't come with a safety net. She never put her name on the building. Just a sentence on the website. For those who choose honesty when no one's watching. At the first annual meeting, Naomi stood at the podium. Not nervous. Not unsure. Just grounded. She told them a story, not about a billionaire or a lost envelope of money. But about a choice. One decision doesn't change your life, she said. It reveals who you already are. And once you see that clearly, everything else has to adjust. The room was silent. Not because they were impressed. Because they understood. Later that evening, Daniel found her standing alone near the window. You were incredible, he said. Naomi smiled. I was honest. He took her hand. Same thing. They stood there, watching the city move below them. Lights blinking. Lives intersecting. Choices being made quietly, constantly. Naomi leaned her head against his shoulder. Somewhere, someone was standing over a table, facing a decision that felt impossibly small, and impossibly heavy. She hoped they'd choose well. The first time Naomi received a letter from a stranger, she didn't know what to do with it. It arrived without warning, slipped between utility bills and grocery flyers. The envelope was thin, handwritten, slightly smudged, like it had been carried around for a while before finally being mailed. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper. The handwriting was uneven. You don't know me, it began. But 3 months ago, I found a wallet on the bus. There was more money inside than I make in 2 weeks. I almost kept it. Then I remembered your story. Naomi sat down. The letter continued. I tracked the owner down and gave it back. It didn't fix my life. I still struggle. But I sleep better now. I just wanted you to know that. Naomi read it twice. Then a third time. She folded the letter and placed it in a drawer she would later label simply, letters. They kept coming. Not every day. Not even every week. But often enough to form a pattern. A construction worker who returned overpaid wages. A college student who refused to cheat even when everyone else did. A cashier who reported a register error that would have gone unnoticed. Small decisions. Heavy consequences. Naomi answered every single one. Not with advice. Not with praise. Just acknowledgement. I see you. It mattered. You're not alone. One night, Marcus sat beside her on the couch, flipping through one of the letters. Why don't you post these? He asked. People would care. Naomi shook her head. They didn't do it to be seen. Marcus nodded, thoughtful. I think that's why they wrote to you. Daniel watched all of this quietly. He noticed how Naomi never framed herself as a hero. She never corrected people when they minimized what she'd done, but she also never allowed anyone to turn it into mythology. "That night didn't make me special," she once said at a small event. "It just showed me who I already was." Daniel admired that more than any speech she ever gave. The foundation grew slowly. Intentionally. They refused massive corporate sponsorships that came with branding demands. They declined interviews that wanted sound bites instead of substance. Some people called it a missed opportunity. Naomi called it boundaries. Years passed. Marcus went off to college. Studied law, just like he said he might. Focused on ethics, accountability, systems that failed quietly and the people who fell through the cracks. Before he left, Naomi hugged him tightly. "You don't have to carry my story," she said. Marcus smiled. "I know. I just want to honor it." One afternoon, Naomi received a message from the diner's new owner. They were shutting down. Rising rents. Staffing shortages. The usual story. She stood across the street on the final day, watching people come and go. A place didn't need to last forever to matter. Some moments only existed to redirect lives. That night, Daniel found Naomi sitting on the porch steps, staring at the street. "Thinking?" he asked. "Remembering," she said. "And realizing I'm not afraid of the future anymore." Daniel sat beside her. "That's new." She nodded. "I used to think security meant control. Now I think it means trust. In yourself. In your values." Daniel smiled. "You taught me that." She laughed softly. "You paid a lot to learn it." He shook his head. "I got it cheap." Later, as the house settled into silence, Naomi placed another letter in the drawer. The stack was thick now. Proof that choices echo. Proof that integrity spreads quietly, person to person, without permission. She closed the drawer and turned off the light. Tomorrow would come. And with it, more decisions. She felt ready. The invitation arrived in a plain white envelope. No logos. No titles. Just an address, a date, and a single line at the bottom. "Your presence matters." Naomi held it for a long time before opening it fully. Inside was a formal request to speak at a national ethics symposium. Educators, business leaders, policymakers, all gathered under one roof. Not for applause. Not for inspiration. But for accountability. Her first instinct was to decline. She had never seen herself as a speaker. She was a witness. "You should go," Daniel said when she showed him the letter. "I don't want to become a symbol," Naomi replied. "Symbols get simplified." Daniel nodded. "But stories don't. And you tell yours honestly." Marcus chimed in from the table. "Mom, people listen when you talk because you don't pretend to be perfect." That stopped her. The auditorium was larger than Naomi expected. Rows of chairs stretched further than she could see from the stage. Screens flanked the podium. Quiet murmurs filled the room as people settled in. When her name was announced, the applause was polite. Curious. Not celebratory. She preferred it that way. Naomi stepped to the podium and rested her hands on the wood. She took a breath, not to calm nerves, but to ground herself. "I'm not here to tell you how to be ethical," she began. "I'm here to tell you how easy it is not to be." The room went still. She didn't mention the diner at first. She talked about pressure. About exhaustion. About how desperation changes the math in your head. She described how people justify small wrongs because they feel invisible. Underpaid. Overlooked. Replaceable. "I didn't wake up that day planning to be honest," she said. "I woke up tired. Heads nodded. Pens moved. Only then did she tell the story. Not with drama. Not with embellishment. Just facts. The money. The wallet. The choice. I didn't return it because I'm better than anyone, she said. I returned it because I didn't want to become someone I couldn't respect. Silence followed. Not awkward. Intentional. During the break, people approached her quietly. A CEO who admitted he had ignored wrongdoing to protect growth. A teacher who confessed she'd stopped reporting cheating because it was easier. A young intern who said, "I thought honesty was naive until today." Naomi listened. She didn't correct them. She didn't absolve them either. She just listened. That night, back in the hotel room, Naomi sat on the edge of the bed, shoes kicked off, exhaustion settling into her bones. Daniel called. "You survived," he teased. "I think I did more than that," she said. "I think I made them uncomfortable." Daniel laughed. That's usually how truth starts. The next morning, the symposium released a summary. Not of her story, but of the question she left them with. What do you do when no one is watching, and it would cost you something to do the right thing? The quote spread faster than she expected. Schools requested materials. Companies asked for workshops. Community groups reached out. Naomi didn't accept all of them. She accepted the ones that wanted work, not optics. Weeks later, a student emailed her. "I reported a grading error that would have helped me. I failed the class. But I didn't fail myself." Naomi read the message twice. Then she smiled. Integrity, she realized, doesn't change the world loudly. It changes people quietly. And quiet change lasts. The attention slowed down. Not all at once, but gradually, like a tide pulling back from the shore. Naomi noticed it in the pauses between emails, in the way interview requests became less frequent, in how the letters in her drawer arrived a little farther apart. And she was grateful for it. Change, she had learned, didn't need constant noise to keep moving. One afternoon, Naomi visited a public high school on the edge of the city. No cameras. No press release. Just a classroom with mismatched desks and tired fluorescent lights. The principal introduced her simply, "This is Naomi. She's here to talk about choices." That was enough. She didn't stand at the front. She sat on a desk. "I won't tell you to always do the right thing," she said. "Because sometimes you won't." "I haven't." The students shifted. Listening. "What matters," she continued, "is what you do after. Do you notice? Do you care? Or do you explain it away?" A boy in the back raised his hand. "What if being honest ruins your chances?" Naomi nodded. "It might. Sometimes honesty costs you something. But lying always costs you yourself." The room went quiet. Not because they agreed. Because they understood. Afterward, a girl waited until everyone else left. "My mom says being good doesn't pay," she said quietly. Naomi looked at her. "It doesn't pay fast," she replied. "But it pays deep." The girl smiled faintly, like she was holding on to the words for later. That evening, Naomi walked home instead of driving. The city felt different when she moved through it slowly. She noticed things she used to miss: chalk drawings on the sidewalk, a man fixing a broken bike for a stranger, someone returning a dropped scarf without expecting thanks. None of it made headlines. All of it mattered. At home, Marcus was visiting from college. They cooked dinner together, bumping elbows in the small kitchen. "You know," Marcus said, stirring the pot, "people at school quote you." Naomi laughed. "That's alarming." "They don't know it's you," he said. "Just the words." She smiled. That felt right. Later, Naomi opened the drawer again. She reread older letters. Not to relive the past, but to remember the scale of it. One choice. Then another. Then someone else making one too. She added a new divider to the drawer. Unsent. In it, she placed letters she wrote but never mailed. Thoughts. Reflections. Regrets she had forgiven herself for. Not everything needed an audience. Some truths were meant only for you. Before bed, Daniel asked her, if you could go back, would you do anything differently? Naomi thought for a long moment. I would have trusted myself sooner, she said. That's all. Daniel reached for her hand. You do now. She squeezed it gently. Yes, she said. I do. The world outside kept moving. Fast. Loud. Uncertain. But Naomi no longer felt the need to keep up. She was exactly where she needed to be. The call came on a Tuesday. Ordinary. Unremarkable. That was how Naomi knew it would matter. Miss Carter, the voice said. Older. Careful. My name is Helen Moore. You don't know me, but I think you saved my son. Naomi sat down slowly. Helen explained that her son worked night shifts, struggled with debt, and once found a cash-filled envelope in a parking garage. He had nearly kept it, until he remembered a story he'd heard years ago on the radio. He went back, Helen said. Tracked down the owner. They cried together. Naomi closed her eyes. That choice didn't fix his life, Helen continued. But it changed how he sees himself. I wanted you to know that. Naomi thanked her. After the call ended, she stayed seated for a long time. Some impact never meets you face to face. That weekend, Naomi and Daniel drove out of town. No schedule. No destination. Just open road. They stopped at a roadside diner, nothing special. Vinyl seats. A humming soda machine. The smell of coffee and fried onions. Naomi smiled at the familiarity. Funny how places like this stay the same, Daniel said. They don't, Naomi replied. We do. As they ate, Naomi noticed a young server arguing quietly with a manager near the counter. A customer had overpaid. The manager waved it off. They won't notice. The server hesitated. Then shook their head. I noticed, they said. Naomi felt something settle in her chest. She left a generous tip. Not as a reward. As recognition. Back home, Naomi began writing again. Not letters this time. Stories. Not hers. Everyone else's. Anonymous. Unpolished. Real. She titled the collection When No One Is Watching. She didn't know if it would ever be published. She wrote it anyway. Marcus called that night. I'm thinking of switching my focus, he said. From corporate law to public interest. Naomi didn't react. She just listened. I want to work on systems, he said. So people don't have to be heroic just to be decent. Naomi swallowed. That sounds important, she said. And hard. Marcus laughed softly. I learned from the best. Late that night, Naomi stepped outside. The air was cool. The street quiet. She thought about the version of herself from years ago, the tired woman behind a diner counter, counting tips, wondering if honesty was a luxury she couldn't afford. She wished she could tell her something. Not that it would work out. Not that it would be easy. Just that the choice would matter. Inside, the house was dark except for one lamp. Daniel had fallen asleep on the couch. Naomi turned it off gently. Tomorrow would bring new decisions. She would meet them the same way she always had. one at a time. Naomi never finished the book. Not because she ran out of stories, but because she realized the ending wasn't hers to write. She kept the manuscript in a drawer beside the letters. Sometimes she added a page. Sometimes she just reread old ones. The words didn't ask to be completed. They asked to be carried. The foundation changed leadership quietly. Naomi stayed on as an advisor, nothing more. She showed up when needed. Stepped back when not. Some people thought that meant she was fading. She knew better. Roots don't announce themselves. One evening, years later, Naomi returned to the neighborhood where the old diner once stood. The building was gone. In its place was a small community center, after-school programs, free meals twice a week, tutoring rooms painted in bright colors. On the wall near the entrance was a plaque. It didn't have her name. It read, "This place exists because someone chose honesty when it was hard." Naomi stood there longer than she meant to. Inside, a volunteer asked if she needed help. Naomi smiled. "No. I just wanted to see it." The volunteer nodded, distracted, already moving on. That felt right too. At home that night, Naomi opened the drawer one last time. She reorganized it slowly. Old letters in the back. New ones in front. Unsent ones sealed. Then she closed it. Not with finality. With trust. Later, sitting beside Daniel on the porch, Naomi listened to the evening sounds, the hum of distant traffic, a neighbor's laughter, wind in the trees. "Do you ever miss it?" Daniel asked. "The attention?" Naomi shook her head. "I miss the clarity," she said. "That moment when the choice was obvious. Life isn't always that clean." Daniel leaned back. "But you still choose." She smiled. "Yes. Every day." In the distance, a siren passed. Somewhere, someone was deciding who they would be when no one was watching. Naomi hoped they'd choose well. But more than that, she hoped they'd know their choice mattered. Even if no one ever told them. Time passed the way it always does. Quietly. Naomi's hair grayed at the temples. Her mornings slowed. Coffee took longer to drink. Silence felt less empty and more like company. She stopped being introduced as the woman who returned the money. She became simply Naomi. And she liked that. Every now and then, someone still recognized her. At a grocery store. In a waiting room. At a park bench. They never asked for autographs. They just said thank you. Naomi always replied the same way. You would have done the same. Sometimes they believed her. Sometimes they didn't. Either way, the moment passed. One spring afternoon, Naomi volunteered at the community center. No sign-up sheet. No announcement. She helped stack chairs after a workshop, hands dusty, back aching in the familiar, honest way effort brings. A teenage boy lingered nearby, pretending to scroll on his phone. "You're her, right?" he asked finally. Naomi smiled. "Depends who you mean." "The honesty lady," he said. She laughed. "That's a new one." He shifted his weight. "I messed up," he admitted. "Nothing big. But I could lie and get away with it." Naomi waited. "What happens if I tell the truth?" he asked. She met his eyes. "Something in you stays intact," she said. "That's not nothing." He nodded slowly. And left. That night, Naomi wrote one last unsent letter. Not to the past. Not to the future. To the moment. "You won't always know the outcome," she wrote. "But you will always know the cost of pretending." She folded the page. Placed it gently in the drawer. And closed it. On the porch, Daniel joined her with 2 cups of tea. They sat without speaking. Years had taught them that silence didn't mean absence. It meant understanding. "I'm glad it was you," Daniel said finally. Naomi looked at him. "Glad what was me?" "That night," he said. "That choice. I'm glad the world met you that way." Naomi leaned her head on his shoulder. "So am I," she said. "Even though I didn't know what it would become." Across the city, lights flickered on in windows. Lives unfolding. Decisions forming. Moments no one would record. Naomi closed her eyes. Somewhere, someone would find themselves at a crossroads. Tired. Afraid. Tempted. And maybe, just maybe, they'd remember a story. Not about money. But about who they wanted to be. We all face moments where doing the right thing costs us something. What would you have done? Tell us in the comments. If stories like this matter to you, like the video, subscribe, and stay here for more stories that challenge the heart and the mind.